Yo, man, what's good, YouTube? It's your boy Mechanics, aka Mr. Napier Boy. And today, man, we got Sweden's deadly gang war, Death Patrol versus Shottaz. If you guys new, man, make sure you guys hit the like button, subscribe, and share me around the road to 1,000 subs. Man, we're only 14 away, I think. We're only 14 away. Let's go ahead and get it. Shout out to Shabla Ross, man. Let's get it.
Contains themes of violence, death, and gang activity. This video is an educational documentary. It does not intend to glorify shown on responsible compared to here. Country that gave us ABBA and IKEA is probably the last country you would think of when it comes to gangster rap. It's a country known for its stability and affordability, its safety, being rated #1 for quality of life. Sweden has ranked #1 on the Gender Equality Index. They provide universal healthcare and free education to the level that the United States can only dream of. It's a beautiful country with incredible nature and picturesque landscapes, but behind the surface lurks a dangerous underbelly. Because despite all of the positive things that Sweden has gotten right, it's a country with deep-seated problems. For example, the international media has sometimes...
The thing about Sweden is, you know what I'm saying, every city, every state, every country, and saying stuff like that, all that has like a ghetto, has a hood, gangs, you know, stuff like that. Every state, city has that type of stuff, bro.
Paid attention to violence occurring in one particular spot of the country.
You know
the city of Malmö, the southern tip of Sweden, which has since the early 2010s made headlines for having an unusually high number of shootings. However, tensions have risen to new highs in the mid-2010s following the so-called European refugee crisis, during which the liberal and desirable state of Sweden received the most asylum applications per capita in Europe. Over time, news and other media, particularly right-leaning ones, have begun publishing alarming reports of so-called no-go zones where even the police couldn't go due to out-of-control gang activity.
Our next guest has just returned from a trip to Europe. He went over there because he wanted to see the migrant crisis firsthand for himself. He went to no-go zones in Sweden. I didn't think there were such places, but there are no-go zones where the police do not go. While he was there, he was jumped by 5...
What? No-go zones? What? So the no-go zones mean the police don't patrol there? That's weird.
Thugs.
That's weird.
I went there, met with the police officers. They said, when we're pursuing a suspect and they cross that threshold, and there's about 30 or 40 of them in Sweden, they will not pursue.
I've just returned from Sweden, where something happened that I never would have imagined in such a wonderful country. My crew and I were attacked. We had things thrown at us, we were punched and kicked, and my cameraman was run over. Unfortunately, Sweden has become a victim of its own humanity. For all its generosity, Sweden is now grappling with communities of disaffected migrants who can't find jobs and have few prospects. There are now 55 declared no-go zones in Sweden, where police have to escort ambulances to ensure their safety. Within minutes of us arriving, a group of young men make it clear we're not wanted and deliberately run down our cameraman.
Whoops! Nej men vad fan!
Hey, 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 hey.
Go on!
And even they fear their presence will be provocative.
I think it's better if you go in without us, because I think it would be...
Very aggressive.
Yeah,
Okay.
if we're young. So we will stay here, and if it
That's
is...
fine.
You watch us.
Perfect.
Thank you. Okay.
Soon, it seemed that this violence and lawlessness had spread to the entire country, as reports circulated of teenagers roaming the streets of Sweden with rifles, and shootouts had become commonplace. The right-wing politicians in Sweden...
What? They had rifles? Oh, little young kids have
and elsewhere were quick to take advantage of these news stories to push their hard-on immigration and crime policies. And even globally, right-wing politicians seek to capitalize on the issue, with Donald Trump himself even being particularly outspoken about the problems arising in Sweden.
You look at what's happening last night in Sweden. Sweden. Who would believe this? Sweden. They took in large numbers. They're having problems like they never thought possible. I love Sweden. Great country, great people. I love Sweden. But they understand I'm right. The people over there understand I'm right. Take a look at what's happening in Sweden.
To be fair, the more liberal and left-leaning media were equally quick to focus on dismantling these claims and suggesting that the problems had at least been greatly exaggerated, with senior figures in the Swedish police coming out to publicly denounce the existence of so-called no-go zones in the country.
To me, I've been working in the most vulnerable areas in Stockholm. I've been working there for 18 years. We don't have a no-go zone in Stockholm. In my opinion, we don't have a no-go zone in Sweden.
But
this is like a secret weapon. It's arcade by output.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think they do.
A video about the migrant crisis. It's a video about gangsters.
I think they do.
And not dissimilar to the migration in the United States.
I think they do get no-go zones, just since Sweden got national attention. They don't say they don't.
That saw Italian Americans establishing the mafia there. In the years that followed the influx of people from all over the world, a new, modern gang culture would emerge in Sweden, arguably with a heavy influence from gangster rap and drill music coming out of Chicago and London. Because as the years went on, reports about increasing violence, and particularly increasing gang-related violence, would unfortunately not go away, but become much more common in Sweden. From shooting high-caliber weapons into rivals' apartments, shootouts in the middle of the street, ghost riding luxury cars for cover, drive-bys out of BMWs with AK-47s, brazen assassinations in packed restaurants, to turf wars between rival gangs that go far beyond shootouts, with gangsters literally blowing up their ops buildings.
It happened in the residential area in Fullerö, north of the city of Uppsala. Investigators say the 25-year-old victim was a neighbour of the targeted premises and had no criminal links. Several other people were injured in 2 other blasts across the country, one in the south and one in a suburb of Stockholm. The attacks are said to be part of a long-running feud between 2 rival gangs in a turf war of drugs and weapons.
Shootouts and bombings have become commonplace in part of the country, leaving the media, public, and politicians asking themselves what can be done to stop the out-of-control gangs from waging war there. Going into the election year of 2022, gang violence became a hot-button issue for voters in Sweden, and even the left-leaning political party in power at the time was admitting that something had gone deeply wrong in the country. But that seemed to be too little, too late for the Swedish public. And now it was the right-wing parties, particularly the far-right party Sweden Democrats, who would end up coming out as a big winner at the elections and becoming the second largest party in Sweden. This enabled them to finally have direct government influence for the first time in the party's history, despite not officially becoming a government party. Now, much of the new government's policy initiatives would center around tougher immigration policies and introducing harsher sentences for gang members, including those who were underage, with the leader of the far-right party even suggesting that kids as young as 13 should be able to get a life sentence there. But by this time,
hell no, come on, 13, hell, life sentence? Now you are fine. They're only 13. They're still kids. You gotta like show them what, like you gotta do something where they're not in the streets and doing that. Just give them a life sentence? Nah, bro.
the criminal.
That's crazy. I ain't know Sweden had deadly gangs. I ain't know that. I thought, saying Sweden was this nice country, so you can visit, like, saying, even live there. I ain't know that hey man, this might be a good documentary, man. Let's see, man.
Gang.
What? Nah, y'all, this is like actually crazy. If you like, what? That's, oh man.
Underworld being this blatant is no surprise.
A 1,000 miles from South.
Hey man, we finna start getting into it. Y'all make sure y'all get y'all popcorn, y'all drinks, y'all snacks. You know what I'm saying? Let's go ahead and watch this documentary together. You know what I'm saying? This little video trailer, Ross. I don't know how many parts. It might be 3 parts, might be 4. You know what I'm saying? And I got some other videos to do for y'all. So yeah, man, y'all get your food, sit back, relax with me. We gonna try to get to 30 minutes for the first and same for the part 1. You know what I'm saying? And then we gonna work our way up into the big ones.
The north, Sweden is rich in scenic variety. From the wide plains of the south.
Sweden's amazing. It's incredible. The people are beautiful. They've got no trash. Their fish even taste like candy. Like, nothing bad ever happens there.
Riots broke out in the Stockholm suburb.
Just across the narrow waterway is the bustling traffic of the modern city.
You look at what's happening last night in Sweden. Sweden. Who would believe this? Sweden. They took in large numbers. They're having problems like they never thought possible.
There's always a friendly policeman to direct visitors to the points of interest.
Sweden. And then a day later, I said, has anybody reported what's going on?
Vi har mycket skjutningar och vi har mycket mord. Jag återkommer till det.
And it turned out that they didn't, not too many of them did. Take a look. Take a look at what happened in Sweden.
You're 40. No.
This is gonna be a good documentary. Where I can just tell, just from the intro he put, that's gonna be a good ass little documentary.
No-go zones in Swedish towns and cities. Correct. 30 to 40 of them.
That's right.
The country.
Man, y'all let me know what y'all think about this documentary. Do y'all fuck with it? Do y'all fuck with it? You know what I'm saying? Y'all let me know down below, man.
The Swedish hip-hop scene emerged in the 80s shortly after the birth of the genre in New York in the late 70s, and Swedish hip-hop followed in the b-boy mold of New York hip-hop's original origins. Firstly, focusing on the pre-rap elements of the genre, like breakdancing, with some of these early hip-hop breakdance events in Stockholm showing the world that Sweden could get down with just as much talent as the New York.
Hold on, y'all, I'll be right back. Alright, y'all.
York b-boys. But at the end of the 1980s, pioneering rappers like MC Tim had emerged from the country, making history by becoming the first rapper in Sweden to ever drop a 12-inch hip-hop record in the native language. The end result was fairly respectful towards the original hip-hop culture, yet undoubtedly somewhat cringe-inducing if you look back at it these days.
Varför har du en kedja runt halsen? Dels för att du vill ha det, och dels för att det är som en symbol för hiphopen. Hur länge håller man på med det, tror du? Jag kommer hålla på tills jag slutar.
But the early rap scene in Sweden and other northern European countries was often defined by the native Caucasian Swedes trying to imitate the African American scene, generally in a respectful manner. Now, in the 1980s, there were already many different ethnic minorities in Sweden, as the country was one of the first in Europe to adopt multiculturalism as a mainstream political ideology, in the years leading up to the hip-hop boom, implementing one of the most generous immigration policies in the continent. First, it was mostly work-based immigration, but in the 70s and 80s, this transformed, as the country began receiving many refugees from all over the world. And in decades since, Sweden has actually taken one of the largest numbers of refugees per capita in Europe and the rest of the so-called Western world. And as demographics shifted, a diverse range of people from those minority groups would soon enter the budding Swedish rap scene and begin expressing themselves. It didn't take long for Swedes with multicultural backgrounds to begin representing the country musically all over the world, with Swedish artists such as Nina Cherry, who actually rapped in English, being one of the first to receive considerable popularity in the late 1980s, with songs that were surprisingly similar to the American pop rap scene. Perhaps in this case, with Cherry's diverse musical ability being the result of her...
Who the hell is Nina Cherry Curry, whatever he said? Who is that? Do y'all know who that is? Can y'all let me know if y'all know who that is? I don't know who the hell that is.
Stepfather being the established American jazz trumpeter Don Cherry, and her biological father, Sierra Leonean actor and musician Amadou Jah. She would have early success with her first album, Raw Like Sushi, which actually peaked at number 3 on the UK albums charts, and she would go on to win 2 Grammy Awards, an MTV Award, and a Grammy nomination. Of course, in the 90s, Swedish pop acts would gain popularity globally, and a wave of Europop groups emerging from Sweden would find huge success all over the world. People like Ace of Base and E-Type would represent Sweden's musical abilities globally. However, beyond the internationalized Swedish artists making music in English for the wider British and American audiences, in the midst of this pop music boom, there was one artist who would take Swedish rap all the way to the top of the Swedish charts. Markoolio was a rapper of Finnish background who migrated to Sweden as a child, with his stage name being inspired by the American rapper Coolio mixed with his real name, Marco, releasing a string of hit albums and songs in Swedish which racked up many platinum plaques in the process. And while Markoolio represented one of the biggest mainstream successes when it came to Swedish rap to emerge in the 90s, his music was more polished, tongue-in-cheek, and aligned with pop music rather than the gritty, authentic, and marginalized voices that pioneered American rap music. Now, earlier in the 90s, homegrown Swedish rap emerged with a more localized style and a connection to their equivalent of the streets. For example, the Latin Kings were a rap group of Swedish and South American backgrounds who made the charts with their 1994 album, which translates roughly to Welcome to the Suburbs, which popularized the use of so-called suburban Swedish, a multi-ethnic youth language adopted by the working-class youth in the country. This dialect was born in the migrant-dominated suburbs in the outskirts of large cities like the capital Stockholm. The name of this dialect as suburban Swedish.
Suburban Swedish English, but what?
Swedish stems from the fact that unlike in the US, where poorer and marginalized communities are often located in the inner cities, while the suburbs are generally safe places for the middle classes, in some European countries like Sweden, this setting is often reversed. And in Sweden's case, the country had actually built an enormous amount of public housing projects in the outskirts suburbs as part of their so-called Million program in the 60s and 70s. This was literally a political mission to provide 1 million new public housing units, a highly ambitious task which they actually succeeded in. I mean, that sounds like something the UK should do, to be honest. But anyway, it was in these suburbs that many of the new migrants eventually settled in Sweden, including most of the refugees who had fled there to safety, with many of these refugee communities often struggling with issues like unemployment and social exclusion. This would eventually create segregated neighborhoods where poor working-class migrants would actually become the majorities. And it was in these communities where a new wave of authentic and real rappers began slowly emerging. Rappers whose backgrounds was much more reminiscent to the original oppressed communities who birthed the American hip-hop scene in inner-city New York. One particular artist would actually end up playing a central role in truly popularizing Swedish rap music that was still faithful to the original American scene in style, while still being localized and authentic to the local Swedish culture. That rapper was called Petter. After dropping his debut album in 1998, he would go on to drop 2 albums that topped the charts in Sweden, as well as racking up a litany of platinum-certified top 10 hits in the decade.
They can do that, and like, they can chart in Sweden, but it'll be better if they can like chart, you know, sit on the US charts, the UK charts, even the Africa charts. So you never really know, you know what I'm saying? Like if they can do that, then that means it's somebody. But when you're doing it in your own like country, stuff like that, like it's really not really gonna work, bro.
Decades that followed. He would play an integral role in making rap music truly mainstream in Sweden, kicking off a Swedish hip-hop boom at the end of the 90s and into the early noughties. However, despite rap becoming mainstream in Sweden throughout the 90s, also during this decade, underground rap circles began to grow, and subgenres such as so-called conscious rap would also gain popularity in the country. The rap group Loop Troop, or Loop Troop Rockers, made up of MC Promo and Supreme, as well as DJ-turned-producers MB and Cosmic. They would gain an audience in Sweden and abroad abroad by rapping in English about graffiti culture, as well as police brutality, corruption, racism, and other socially critical topics with a Swedish lens. Since then, they've made a name for themselves in European underground circles for the last few decades. However, interestingly, as the decades went on and Sweden's demographics would slowly shift, partly due to the influx of migrants flocking to these suburban communities, rappers of a diverse range of backgrounds would ultimately emerge and increasingly reach the Swedish mainstream music culture. Artists such as Timbuktu, named after the city in Mali that his father hailed from, who would eventually drop a #1 album in 2007, which I'm not even going to try and pronounce. There's also the Nigerian-born Ayo and Adam Tensta, whose father was from Gambia, but adopting a rap name derived from the suburb of Tensta in the outskirts of Stockholm where he hails from. This was yet another suburb that has recently become known for its escalating gang wars. Into the 2000s, the Swedish rap landscape would begin to look more and more diverse, with more breakout talent coming in the form of Ison and Phil and their crew High One, as well as people like Ken Ring and the rap group Labyrinth, whose rappers come from various backgrounds ranging from Chile, Palestine, and Serbia. The diversity in Swedish rap would extend beyond simply the heritage of the rappers themselves, as these rappers would commonly speak in their music about their hard upbringings in the million-programmed suburbs, as well as criticizing the racism and exclusion of Swedish society that had apparently been directed towards minorities from these neighborhoods. But although gangs had certainly already begun to form in many of these areas, the music rarely, if ever, actually depicted the gang lifestyle. However, in the final year of the 2000s, one rap group emerged that changed this completely. That group was called Kartellen, translating to the cartel. This group would become famous for their provocative depictions of crime and social problems in the suburbs they grew up in. The story of Kartellen is a somewhat unusual one, but to make a long story short, the group was started by two lifelong Swedish criminals who were serving long sentences in Finnish prison for allegedly taking part in a murder plot. The group was made up of Leo Kinnuson, which means Chinese, Carmona, of Swedish and Chilean background, and Jan Babyface Raninen, of Finnish and Swedish background. While in prison, Carmona decided to start a rap group in Sweden that would tell the stories of him and Raninen, the kind of stories about Sweden's criminal underworld that the country had never heard before in music. These were the true stories from their past lives of crime, including one of the largest robberies in Sweden's history, in which Carmona was allegedly one of the 3 perpetrators in 2002, as well as the murder of one of Sweden's biggest mob bosses of the 90s, Dragan Josovic, whom Raninen had apparently executed in cold blood during a horse racing event in 1998 whilst working as a hitman. This was an assassination which kick-started a violent Serbian gang war within Sweden. Raninen received an 8-year sentence for the murder, which he only ended up serving a little over 5 years of. An incredibly low sentence that many thought was actually the result of his innocent looks, earning him the nickname Babyface. For the rap group Kartellen, Carmona recruited 2 rappers from their old stomping grounds in the suburbs of Stockholm, Seb Stax and Kaka, both of whom had lengthy criminal pasts. Now, this group was a winning combination, and Kartellen would go on to become extremely popular.
Oh yeah, remember y'all, like I said, this part 1 will be about 30 minutes. So we got like 8 minutes left, so this part 1 will be 30 minutes to my nappy squad. 30 minutes. I repeat.
In the Swedish media and charts in the following years. However, at the time, they were clear exceptions in the Swedish rap scene, where many also thought that gangster rap just didn't fit in with Sweden's open and tolerant culture. This is actually reflected in a popular music video by The Carousel, a parody of The Cartel that came out in 2012, which makes fun of Swedish gangster rap in this context. This skit would actually mock Swedish gangsters for wearing sunglasses in the winter and making light of their dental hygiene, a music video which even featured a cameo from the real Cartel, who pull up on them at the end of the video.
Stäng av musiken! Musiken, det skojar ni med oss. Vad är ditt problem? Vad fan är ditt problem? Driver du? Hej, driver du? Det är vi som är Kartellen. Mannen, har du härmat vår lock? Hej, vad fuck? Vad är det här då, mannen? Vadå, du har fet lina?
Now, at the beginning of the 2010s, true gangster rap in Sweden was still extremely niche. However, that would rapidly change after the drill music movement began spreading from Chicago to the rest of the world all around these times. With Chicago rappers ultra real.
That's how y'all know Chief is generational. If his music got around the whole world, and most of people like rap about that gang stuff, is because of Chicago scene. Keith, Little Dirk, you know what I'm saying, Doug, Racy and them. You know what I'm saying?
Violent interpretation of gangster rap rapidly influencing the Swedish rap scene, as various artists would emerge trying their best to bring that Chirac energy to Sweden and showing the world just how real tourist areas like Stockholm could actually be beneath the surface. Interestingly, by 2018, amid the rise in Swedish gangster rap imitating Chicago drill, an unexpected face would enter the Swedish rap scene. The rapper Einar, a wholesome-looking 15-year-old teenager whose mother is actually an accomplished Swedish actress named Lena Nilsson. Although
Oh, what? It was 15 He was, bro, do not tell me he died bro, what? He seemed like a good kid. Like, was he just rapping just because? Cause I know this is a person that gets killed in 2020 when he get kidnapped in 2020 for the introduction, but I want to like his journey, like how he became a rapper and why he became, you know what I'm saying?
Einar didn't grow up in the public housing projects like most other Swedish gangster rappers. He did grow up in the Stockholm suburb of Enskededalen, where idyllic wooden houses in the south, like ones often seen in travel shows about Sweden, would meet working class apartment buildings in the north. And these kind of hoods are actually where Einar can be seen hanging out with his friends in early music videos, particularly Enskededalen, or simply Dalen, a small district in Stockholm, which is also where one of Stockholm's most infamous gangs, the Dalen Network, allegedly takes its name from. Despite his mother's success, Einar's childhood was reportedly somewhat troubled, as he claims in his song Youngster with Extra Energy that he and his friends were up to no good from a young age, stealing scooters and selling drugs in school. Eventually, Einar would meet a man called Patty. Now, that's his name, don't cancel me for that. But he would allegedly be a former leader of the Dalen Network gang who would actually end up becoming Einar's manager, together with another alleged member of the network called Chapo. This street management duo would unfortunately meet a tragic end, when in 2018, Packy would be killed with allegations that Chapo was even responsible, with all of this ultimately leading to a trial where Chapo would beat the charges. With all of this going on, it's no wonder then that Einar
he beat the charges? Oh, hold on. This is a good documentary.
Was going through some difficult times. Einar's problem behaviour would eventually cause the social services to take him away from his family for 6 months, but this would do little to change his behaviour, and eventually he began carrying a gun and following in the path of gangsters that he had surrounded himself with. However, Einar had also been incredibly passionate about rap music since a very young age, and during these turbulent years of his life, clips would circulate online depicting the baby-faced teenager rapping in the studio and outside in the Swedish streets, with Einar putting the pain from his turbulent upbringing into his lyrics, suggesting that rap had always been his salvation in between spells as a drug dealer, with Einar ultimately inferring that rap music actually made him a millionaire. His career would absolutely explode in early 2019 after he dropped his gangster love song Katten, or Trakten, which translates to cat in this song meaning a girl from the hood. And he would also drop a music video for the track which was unmistakably gangster despite its romantic undertones. Although there were already some gangster rappers who were already getting popular before Einar, since his success, gangster rap in Sweden has truly become the sound of the mainstream, including rappers with real connections to some of the most violent gangs in the country. And as time has gone on,
that is so facts. Raptors top the charts, but don't leave the gangs. That's true, but also they really can't, because you know what I'm saying, they're probably jumped in, stuff like that. You can't really do that. You probably get DP maybe. I don't know, but I mean that is, like, they can still be part of, you know, their little clique, their little gang, but you know what I'm saying, I feel like once rappers get up there to a certain level, I feel like they should just have their own entourage, make their own crew. Saying like a crew like OTF, 4K, you know what I'm saying, 4PF and all that stuff like that. That's what rappers should do right there. Click on click. You're saying, like, just say like you're still on that, but you're just making the music and not worrying about like the street shit. Then you have your little goons, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? OTF. You know what I'm saying?
in the continued acceptance of drill music and culture in the mainstream, Swedish gangster rap has gotten far more violent, with firearms in music videos becoming commonplace, and the gangbanging culture of the suburbs becoming a popular theme of the music there. Unfortunately, Einar's proximity to the streets would ultimately prove fatal. But in order to understand the deep connections between the music and the streets of Sweden, we've got to take a closer look at the hidden criminal underworld, and learn about the real and dangerous gangs operating beneath the surface in what's supposed to be one of the safest countries on earth.
Oh yeah, we in gangs of Stockholms. Sit back, relax. If y'all gonna use the bathroom, make sure y'all pause the video, go use the bathroom and all that. Let's get into it though.
The wave of gangster rap in Sweden makes it seem like the gang problem has arrived in the country pretty much out of nowhere during the 2010s. And while to a certain extent you could argue that that's the case, the roots of the gang problems in Sweden go arguably much further into the past. Some concerns towards the social problems brewing in the Swedish suburbs have been discussed even internationally as far back as the 90s. For example, there's a 1998 article in the New York Times highlighting the ghettoization of a Stockholm suburb called Rinkeby, a place where the brutal gang war that we later discuss in this video actually begun. This was an article which ended with a bizarre romanticization of the hood.
Alright y'all, that's gonna end up part 1 of the reaction video. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. Be back for part 2. Part 2 will drop Tuesday. I'm recording part 1 on Sunday night right now. So part one will be out Monday, which is today. I would say today, Monday. And then part 2 will be out Tuesday. The Nappy Squad, man. I'll see y'all later, man.